got Mike Collins here, who's going to talk to us about writing a cover letter for academic jobs. Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
So the first question I want to ask is, what do hiring committees look for in a good cover letter? What makes a good cover letter?
Yeah. Well, there are different types of job, and I guess I'll come in a bit to thinking about how they might be different for different kinds of jobs. But in general, a hiring committee is really at least two different types of stakeholders in the job. Increasingly, this is the case. There's a sort of professional services, HR style thing that has to be dealt with and handled. And also there are the academics who will be kind of making the decisions and doing the shortlisting. And it is one of those areas where academics do have real sway, and they are importantly listened to in that process. But it is worth bearing in mind in a covering letter that there is this other reader, this sort of this professional services reader who will be checking off the covering letter against the criteria quite rigorously. So they're looking at it from the perspective of thinking, does this person match every criteria that has been listed? And if they are, then they have to have a really darn good reason to not shortlist you, because there are all sorts of reasons around DEI and employment law and various things. And they're looking at it from that thing. So it's actually worth really thinking about those people, which brings me to the main thing, which is the form of the covering letter should be dictated and pretty much copy the form of the job ad. And they're not looking necessarily for a work of particular creativity or wonderment, much as we might enjoy that experience. If there is a desirable criteria, if there is an essential criteria, say how you meet it, and say it explicitly, using as far as possible the language that they have designed, because then they can't really say no. I mean, it has to be at least in terms of a shortlisting potentially. It has to be a compelling reason why. If there are desirable criteria that you feel for a particular job you don't necessarily meet, then fill that hole with something else. Would be the way I would think about it. So look at the job ad as everything that you have to cover, and if you do feel that there's a shortfall in one particular area, find another way to pitch something from your CV. And your CV and your covering letter do need to line up sensibly. If someone gets a sniff of something being a little bit massaged, I mean, everyone does it a little, of course. There are a heck of a lot more experts in things than there are experts in things if you only read covering letters, but it does need to make provable sense. So it's a little bit like making a case in an essay or something, where you need to make sure that the evidence is there. So ordinary in form, I would say. I am this person, I match the criteria, and simply actually say that. You'll feel confident enough to say that. And that tends to be how the best ones work, because the process is going to be very quick, particularly when they're going to be reading very quickly when dealing with the sort of numbers that we are commonly dealing with in our particular discipline or subdiscipline.
Great. Could you talk a bit about how your covering letter might need to look different for different kinds of jobs in academia, whether it's kind of teaching posts, research posts, or research assistants posts?
Again, it's in some ways it's a similar kind of advice. You have to think about who your audience might be. If there's a teaching post that has been advertised for, then there is a person whose position you are filling, usually, if it's temporary contract in most cases, rather than one of the teaching and scholarship contracts, which are kind of you increasingly see. But if it is a shorter term post, then they really have in mind the person who it is that was doing that job and was doing it successfully and then went on leave for whatever reason. So it's really worth doing your research into why that job has appeared. Absolutely send an email to the head of department. They're very happy to answer them because they want to make sure that the process is smooth. They have to be accountable, so they want to make sure that it's smooth and good and doesn't put people off or whatever. And they take that job very seriously. So do make sure that you send that email, find out what it is that you are replacing effectively, and replace them. It's sort of, it kind of, you know, it is really actually quite like that for a teaching job. Now, a research job is a different beast in some ways, because you are generally filling a job that doesn't yet exist, or is an area that they wish to be in, or someone has left and they are going to use that as a moment to think about different research priorities and different things. So for a research letter, generally think about the questions you should be asking of the email that you said to a head of school is, what do your research clusters look like? Imagine how you might then sit yourself into that, but also provide avenues that have previously not. In some ways, it's actually a nicer experience to write for those jobs in some ways, not just because their jobs tend to be permanent with more money, but also because there's a kind of you're definitely playing to your own strengths and telling someone what it is that you can do. If there's omissions, don't worry as much, because you can fill in some of those when it comes to the job interview, if you feel you haven't quite covered things as much. Whether it's a teaching post or whether it's a research post, no more than about 4 pages. I mean, there's a succinctness to this. When you see incredibly long covering letters, there are certain academic markets where that is far more common, but a lot in particularly talking about North America. But in those cases, those academics on that hiring committee, that'll be part of their build work for the semester, but the timelines and workloads don't quite work in the same way with British academia. So there is a speed, and it is about trying to find a fit as far as possible. And that's generally what's meant by fit, rather than something that's, you know, about gatekeeping necessarily. So that would be my advice on the different forms.
Are there any other things about cover letters that you would like to talk about? Are there any kind of common mistakes that you've seen that you'd like to kind of warn people against?
So the common mistake is a misreading of audience, and that's why I've sort of put that forward. I think you see a generic covering letter that's provided for every single job, and because we are academics and because of our primary sense of value may be our particular research, sometimes you see those things really foregrounded in a teaching application, and then at the end it says, oh, and by the way, I can teach stuff. And that really doesn't always fly. You have to be artful, because you have to say, my teaching will be research led, and I can prove that that I will bring this area of my study to the discussion. You have to be sort of artful about how you do that, rather than just quite a waxing lyrical about everything that you've done and your various publications and all of that sort of stuff, which we do need, but it's not the be all and end all for a teaching profession, teaching application. For a research application, and that's also true in a way, because you are still pitching to a particular job advert in a particular area of research. If you hit that marker, if you hit that first clearance and end up in the process of being shortlisted, you can then pad out that material. So the degree of succinctness, the degree of precision, and really thinking about who it is that's reading it. Definitely tailor every job ad. And I know it's a pain in the neck because it takes forever, and it really does take forever. And you need to get we need to have some sort of debt system that gives back 3 years of everyone's life that they have spent writing these things. But the success will go up if the positions the applications are tailored.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike.
You're very welcome.